All right, good evening. Continuing in our Parsha series, we are now middle of the book of Devarim, the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, the book of the Jewish people in the desert. So last week's Torah portion, if you remember, I'll recap a little bit, ended with, again, a description of the inauguration of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, of this structure that the Jewish people created in the desert, according exactly to the way God specified. It should be made exactly the way, I tell you, it was made exactly the way God told the people to do it. And at the end, the inauguration of this tabernacle involved every single tribe bringing offerings, bringing sacrifices on the inauguration of the period of the inauguration. So there were 12 days of bringing offerings. Each tribe had a nasi, had a prince who would bring the offerings. The tribe that didn't have a representation of bringing offerings was the tribe of Levi. So this is where we pick up this week's Torah portion, where Aaron from the tribe of Levi is sad. Aaron, who is the high priest, Aaron who gets to take the offerings, bring them onto the altar, do so much service in the tabernacle itself, asks God for something, like he feels left out. Everybody else, all the other tribes are bringing their offerings. I, Aaron, don't get to bring an offering. And from there we kind of learn something about this yearning that Aaron had to connect to God, to bring these offerings, to somehow be part of the collective. The collective were bringing, every single other tribe was bringing their offerings and being part of this big inauguration. And even though Aaron had a different job, he wanted that job, he wanted that, So we learn from here this concept of envy. We had spoken previously where there are certain character traits that there's a middle road, right? So you don't want to be so generous that you give everything away, but you don't want to be so stingy that you give nothing away. So you want to follow the median, the golden median, the middle road. We also spoke before about how anger has no medium. Like there's no place for anger at all. We have to wipe anger out from our midst somehow. How we do that is complicated, but there is an idea that anger isn't an emotion that we that is good for us. We have to try to work against getting angry. But here there's maybe a focus on jealousy or envy. Here Aaron wanted to do what the other people were doing. He wanted to bring the offerings. He wanted to be part of that. And so God says, I understand that. That's not what you're going to do. You, Aaron, and your descendants get the work of lighting the menorah. Lighting the menorah, right? We still have the menorah today. And in fact, there are two things that Aaron was given to do that continue to this very day. So one is the lighting of the menorah that he got to do in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, that then continued into the menorah that was in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and continues today with our lighting of the menorah on Hanukkah. That was all, the Hashmonayim were descended from Aaron, the high priest. So we have this continuation through the ages of lighting the menorah that started back here in the Mishkan, started back in our Torah portion, where we learn about Aaron being jealous, wanting to do this. God says, no, you get to light the menorah, and you also get to bless the people. And we talked about that last week, how the Birchas Kohanim, the blessing of the nation that the tribe of Aaron get to do even today in Israel, every day, in outside of Israel, on the holidays, on the high holy days, on the Pesach, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot are days where the Kohen gets up and he blesses through God's blessing the nation, but he's the one who's like the conduit for the blessing. We talked about it last week. But these are things that continue to this day. So I think that what permeates this week's Torah portion is called Beha'aloscha, which means to raise up. So it says in the beginning, Hashem spoke to Moses saying, speak to Aaron and say to him, when you kindle the light towards the face of the menorah, shall the seven lamps cast light. So we're God's saying, you Aaron, you get to light the menorah, you get to kindle it, you get to step up there and put the flame there and make the flame rise up. And I think, again, the idea of what permeates through our Torah portion is a concept of striving towards holiness, striving to connect to God, trying to be part of something bigger and transcendent, and not physical, something spiritual, something elevated. Says that that the candle, that a candle is like that has a flame, and that our soul is like the candle of God, that we have an aspect in us that needs to rise up. We've spoken many times about a soul being something that is spiritual, that is connected to God, and that we want to use it to raise ourselves up, to look upwards. The menorah is the work of Aaron, is to light the menorah, is to take earth and raise it upwards, to bring it up into the heavens, to look up, to raise ourselves up, to when we light a candle, we don't let go of our own spirituality. We actually transfer spirituality, but we elevate the spirituality. Our spirituality doesn't diminish when we light a candle. Our flame doesn't diminish, doesn't go out, doesn't get less. In fact, it gets more as we put our flame onto another flame, and that catches fire and that raises up. So we don't get diminished. The other flame gets to be enlightened and to raise itself up, and we also get to raise up. So this whole idea of what it was that Aaron was given in this week's Torah portion, he was given this work of lighting a menorah, of lighting flames, of inflaming people. And it says that Aaron, there are two qualities about Aaron that we can learn about. One was his intense humility, and we've also learned that about Moses being the most humble of all people, but Aaron also was very, very humble. And his humility of having this job, having the job of lighting the menorah, having the job of blessing the people. He didn't get all arrogant. He didn't get egotistical. He stayed really humble. He had his eye on the goal. He understood it wasn't about him. It was about him spreading light and spreading Torah. It says in the Holy Temple that the light, when they would light the menorah inside the temple, that the windows were very narrow on the inside, and then they would open out and sort of like go from small to big. So you would look out. It was shed the light out, right? It was about spreading the light out. The light emanated from inside the temple, from the menorah, and it would spread out. Right? And that's, again, a message for us. Like, we have to spread that light out. We have this candle of God that's inside of us. We have the light inside of us. Like, how do we spread that out? Then, we think about that. We can talk about that. But I think this is a message for this week's Torah portion, is about spreading the light that we have inside of us. When Aaron is said, no, you don't get to bring the sacrifices like the other tribes, but you get to do this. You get to light the menorah. You get to bless the nation. You get to spread the light out. You get to elevate. You get to light the other flame, right? Can we light our own flame, number one, and can we light other people's flames? Can we inspire our children? Can we inspire our spouses? Can we inspire our communities, even when we're in COVID lockdown and quarantines or whatever we are in, and we cross the street when we see someone coming the other way, but yet we can still somehow find conduits for increasing spirituality, increasing the light, and letting that light go up. So I think that's the number one. So I think that the pervasive message that I'm going to thread through all the different episodes in this week's Torah portion are about elevation, about coming close to God, about bringing transcendentness into our life, about something that we yearn for, is the transcendent. And it's there for us to get at. So the menorah had 7 candelabras, 7 branches, right? 3 on one side, 3 on the other side, and 1 in the middle. And it's about the one in the middle. The one in the middle, says many of our commentators, 2 things, is that represents Torah, represents a connection, a guidebook, how to live our lives. If we focus on it, what's in the middle? What do we focus on? What is all our activity kind of centered around? We talked about this before with the Mishkan, with the tabernacle being in the center of the camp. It was what the camp revolved around, like there were spokes of a wheel outside of the center. The center was the Mishkan, was the tabernacle. And here we have it again in the menorah, that the menorah had this middle flame, which was all the center of, like our Ner Tamid in our synagogues is representative of that. Never went out. That Ner Tamid that we have in our synagogues, still burning. And it's actually interesting. It says in the Medrash that after the Holy Ark and everything was buried deep beneath, we don't exactly know where it is, but that candle, that Ner Tamid, that menorah is still lit to this day. like we don't know where it is, but it's still lit today. That's a kind of interesting thing to think about. So what's in the center? Torah is in the center. Shabbos is in the center. The idea of the Sabbath. We've talked before about what keeps the Jewish people going. Is it the Sabbath that keeps us going, or do we keep the Sabbath going? Like, we're so intermingled with Sabbath as a way to testify for God being the creator of the universe, for God being the one who brought us out of Egypt, for God being the one that's always with us, that gives us this day of rest to rejuvenate and to build ourselves so we can continue and shed the light into the week. That what we do on that Sabbath is so crucial to who we are in our work days. That is the center of our week, is focusing on the Sabbath, and then what we bring with us into the week comes from what we did on that Sabbath. So a central focus of the Jewish people's consciousness is God, Torah, and Sabbath. So that's kind of like what's represented as that middle branch that the three other ones on either side are facing. So the first thing we learned about in this week's Torah portion is Aaron asking for being able to be like the other tribes, being told, no, you get the menorah, you get blessing the nation. That's what you get. That's your job. That's what you have to do. That's where you will shine. So the next thing we learn about is a similar idea. It's about the people who carried the bones of Joseph when the Jewish people left Egypt. Right, where everybody's leaving Egypt, it's the death of the firstborn, and people are ready to go. The morning comes, and they leave, and we understand. We've learned about this before. And Moses goes back, and Moses, along with other people, carry the bones of Joseph with them out of Egypt. The Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, 1 year later, that the Jewish people are now commanded to bring as a memory from leaving Egypt. We're now, every year we have a commandment to bring the Paschal lamb sacrifice, which we don't today because we don't have a tabernacle, but we have it on our Seder plate, right? We have this shank bone or whatever we have on our Seder plates, but it's a memory of the Paschal sacrifice that we are supposed to bring and will bring one day when we have the third temple. So we have a mitzvah to bring the Paschal sacrifice, unless you've been in contact with the dead, unless you have you've been spiritually affected by being in contact with the dead. So the people that carried the bones of Joseph out of Egypt are unable to bring that Paschal sacrifice because they've been in contact with the bones of Joseph. So they complain and they say, we want to do that. We want to bring the Paschal sacrifice. We want to be part of that. It's the same thing that Aaron was asking. I also want to bring that. I want to be close to God. I want to lift myself up. I want to be more than I am. I want more avenues to connect myself to God. And I don't have that one. And they complain. And Moses goes to God. God comes back and he says, you know what? I'm going to institute a holiday called Pesach Sheni, a second Passover holiday for you, so that when you've gone through your purification, so to speak, rituals, etc., there you can bring the Paschal sacrifice, and I'll give you an opportunity to do that. It's like the second chance. We have a second chance at doing something that we couldn't do before. And again, it's about yearning for connection. They wanted to be part of the community. They wanted to be part of the Jewish people. They wanted to be part of getting close to God through this mitzvah that was given to everybody else. And like Aaron, these people who had the merit to carry the bones of Joseph are quote unquote discriminated against, can't bring that Paschal sacrifice at the correct time, and so they ask God to help them, and he says, fine, I'll give you another opportunity. So again, it's about, like this interplay between us and God, right? Yet we think, okay, it's all fixed and it's the way it is. No, we have prayer, we have way to kind of like interact with God and push things along and complain to God, and and God answers us and says, you're right, you need to have a second opportunity, a second stab at this. So it gives them the second stab at it. So then the next thing we learn about in this week's Torah portion, after we've had the menorah and the lights and the raising up and the enlightening and the spirituality and being humble, and Aaron, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, I meant to, but not only was Aaron very, very humble, but that the work that he did every single day, when he lit that menorah, every single day he lit the menorah and cleaned up the ashes and lit the menorah, it was done, says our commentaries, it was done with the same passion, with the same fire as the previous day. Like the first day he did it was really, 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 really exciting, and he was really into it, and he did it. And then the second day he did it with the same kind of passion, the same kind of fervor. It felt unique every single day. Something really special and something to learn about. That this is what Aaron was able to do. It says that he had a passion that didn't ebb. It was a fervor that continued every single day with the same level of passion. It didn't diminish, right? So, we might be very excited about doing something one day, and then the next day we're not so excited about doing it, and probably 2 weeks later we're really not excited about doing it or something. And I think, again, it's a lesson for our day about, trying to inject what we do and how we do it with the same level of excitement that it was on the first day when we did it. The first day that you whatever it is, that you change your grandchild's diaper. Very exciting because you're excited to have a grandchild, but probably like 3 months later, maybe you're not so excited about changing that baby's diaper, but maybe there's a lesson to learn here. Like I should be or I could be, or I want to work at being super excited that I have this grandchild, that I can continue to change their diapers, that maintain that level of passion and inspiration, that this is like an understanding of what you're doing and what you have the merit to do and that what you have the gift to do. So anyway, that's the message. One of the messages that we learn about the menorah, humility, good envy. Like I'm envious. Aaron and the people who carried the bones of Joseph were envious in a good way. Like they wanted spirituality. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to be part of this way to connect to God. So God says, okay, fine. So do it this way. Do it with the menorah. Do it with Pesach Sheni. Okay, let's keep going. Now we learn about the way in which the Jewish people traveled. This is the first time the Jewish people are now traveling from Mount Sinai. They were at Mount Sinai for over a year, and now it's time to move on. And what's going to tell them how to move? How are they going to know how to move? They have manna coming from heaven. That's the food they're getting. They have water out of a rock, and now they are surrounded by clouds. They have clouds of glory that surround them. It says there were 7 clouds, one on each side, each of the north, south, east, and west. That's 4. One above them, one below them, and one way in front to lead them. They were the 7, the 4, 6, 7. That was 7 clouds, and there's also a pillar of fire that would lead them at night. So when it was time for the Jewish people to move on, there would be a miracle in the sense that God would raise up the cloud, and it would start to move, and the people knew, okay, it's time to get going. And the trumpets would sound, and there would be this great scurrying around to pack up the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and pack themselves up and get ready to move. And they would move with the clouds, they would move with the fire. These were their ways. This was their Google Maps. This was their navigation system, was the fire and the clouds that would lead them as they traveled in the desert. They didn't know when they were going to move, and they didn't know how long they would stay in each place. So there was a trust that the Jewish people had to have that God had, was going to lead them appropriately and had a reason why they were going this way and that way. And when it was time to move on, and when it was time, and against perhaps their own desire, perhaps they had a desire like, I like it here, or like I've only been here a day, I don't want to pack up again, right? I've only been here one day. Like there were different periods of time that the Jewish people were in camp, sometimes for a short time, sometimes for a long time, but they didn't know how long they would be there, and it taught the Jewish people a certain level of trust that they had to have, that God would lead them appropriately, that it was the right time to go, that they had to leave, like here was time to go, or here was time to stay. Maybe they wanted to leave, they didn't like this place, it wasn't time to leave. And so there was a trust and a letting go of being in control of where they were going and how they were going. Just like we have that trust in our ways, when we follow it, who knows where, we're following it on this Henry Hudson Parkway and up here and down there, and we're following it. We trust that it's going to take us to our destination. We in 2020 have a desire. We know where we're going, but here the Jewish people in the desert, they knew they were heading to the Holy Land, but they didn't know how they were going to get there. And so just like we trust our ways to lead us where we want to go, and perhaps in the quickest way or the way with the least tolls or whatever it is, So here the clouds and the fire are leading us, and we are learning how to trust in God, how to know it's time to leave, how to know it's time to stay, and to follow God. And this idea of following God, this idea of trusting, and again, maybe we can relate that to our days today. Like, we don't know what will be next week. We don't know where we're going with this COVID stuff. We don't know where we'll be in 6 months. Will we be in Shul on Rosh Hashanah? Will we be able to have school in the fall? Like, where's our journey? Where's our journey? And yes, we talk platitudes about, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And it is about the journey, but it's also, in this week's Torah portion, we're being taught to recognize that God's with us. We don't have the clouds, and we don't have a fire showing us that God's in charge and God's leading us. And yet, there are, the way in which this is heading, and from that standpoint of understanding that God's here and God's in charge, and there's a direction we're heading. We don't know where we're going, but can we trust, and can we let go on some level, do what I have to do, pick up and move when I have to pick up and move, and then stay when I have to stay. And so I think it's a very powerful Torah portion to think about this concept of they're coming out of Egypt, they're leaving somewhere, they're going somewhere, they're going to the land of Israel. Where are we coming from? Where are we going? What's guiding us? What's protecting us? They had the clouds protecting us. They had the fire leading them. They had, again, this idea of fire. Go back to the beginning of the Torah portion about the menorah and the fire being a good thing. It's a flame. It's a candle. It's a light that reaches up, that goes up into the transcendent. And here's the flame. It's a good flame. It's a flame that's leading us. It's a flame that's warm. It's a flame that tells us, I'm with you. Follow me. Come with me. Trust me. I know where you're going, and you need to follow me, because that's the plan. And they did that. These Jewish people did that. And it's interesting because it says in the Medrash, in the commentators, in the stories, that some of the people that were in the whole encampment of the Jewish people were known as the Erev Rav. These people were known as, quote unquote, the mixed multitudes. They were Egyptians in Egypt, and they saw all the plagues, and they understood, and they cleaved to Joseph. They wanted to be part of the Jewish people. They didn't want to be part of the Egyptians. And I understand that they lived a little bit on their own in a separate a geographic section. They were circumcised like the Jewish people were circumcised. They were also circumcised, and they left with the Jewish people. They were known as the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes, and they left with the Jewish people. They saw the miracles, and they were so passionate, and they really wanted to go with the Jewish people, and they went out with the Jewish people. So they caused trouble along the way. We're going to learn about that. But again, it sort of speaks about the idea of being inspired, having an inspiration, wanting to follow, saying, yes, makes sense, I'm going to follow. But then can we continue with that passionate sense of inspiration? How long can we hold that? Can we hold it when it gets dark? Can we hold it when it's nighttime, when we can't see properly, when it's all murky and misty and dark and we don't know where we're going? Can we hold on to the vision? There's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful parable about a man who's wandering, or woman wandering in a forest, and they don't know where they're going, and it's pitch black, you can imagine. And all of a sudden it starts raining, and there's even worse, it's pitch black and it's raining and you're in the forest and you don't know how to get out, and it's really feels very bleak. And all of a sudden there's a flash of lightning. And that flash of lightning lights up the whole forest. And what happens is that the person can now see where they're going, and they can see, oh, I'm supposed to go this way and this way, and that'll get me out of the forest. And with that memory of the flash of lightning, they're able to navigate their way out. Or maybe there's another flash of lightning further down. But I think it speaks about these times of clarity that we might have, inspiration, clouds of I know God's here, and I'm following God in the wilderness. I'm following God in my daily life in 2020. But then it gets dark and it gets plateaued, and we don't see God anywhere, and we're anxious and nervous. But maybe one of the things we can do is go back to the time where we felt clarity. Remember those inspirational moments. Remember the inspirational people, and sort of hold on to that and remember that, and kind of maneuver perhaps in the right direction, whether the right direction is. But with that clarity that you had back then, hold on to that. Let's use that when the times get dark, when we're in the desert and we don't see where we're going, when it feels bleak. Right now it feels a little bleak, I think. Like I think we don't know where we're going, and maybe we don't have a flash of lightning kind of a experience, but we do have times in our lives, I think, most of us, where we felt the hand of God in our lives and knowing that God's with us. So maybe we need to hold on to those times and say, like, I felt it then, I know it's here now, and how do I reach out for that? How do I reach up for that? How do I light the menorah? How do I light my own soul? How do I inspire myself? You know, it's a lot about what we're doing for ourselves in this day and the people around us, obviously. All right, so the people were the people were a mixed people. There were people who had come out fleeing from the Egyptians, all the miracles, right? We had the inauguration of the Mishkan. They're now beginning to travel. They have the fire in front of them. They have the clouds. They have manna from heaven. They have water from a rock. They have pretty much everything they need. And there's a really wonderful teaching by Rav Soloveitchik, who talks about the difference between a camp, a machaneh, like the people who are in a camp because they're fleeing from something, like they become a camp because they have the similar enemy, they have the same fears, they're joined because they're fearful of the same thing, versus a congregation. A congregation, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, is a grouping that comes from a shared mission, that we have something in common, that we have a shared purpose, that we're part of the same plan, that we're on the same, we have the same kind of value system, we have the same source of our knowledge, of our destiny. We're in this together, not just because we're fleeing something or because we're frightened, but because we have something to look forward to together. We're a unity, we're an essence, we're one together. That's the difference, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, between a congregation and a camp. And the Erev Rav, who are these mixed multitudes, who were the non-Jewish people who came out with the Jewish people, the Egyptians that came out, they lost resolve and they start to complain. They start to complain. They complain about the travel, that it's like it's too much to travel and it's like too hard to travel. They complain about the manna, that the manna, the food that's coming from the heavens, this heavenly, divine, angelic food that apparently is white in color and it can taste like anything you want to. They're complaining about the food, this manna from heaven that is in the merit of Moses, our teacher, Moses who is up in the higher heavens, Moses who is teaching Torah and truth to the people. In his merit comes this food. It's totally spiritual, completely 100% absorbed by the body. There's nothing wasteful about the ingredients, about the manna. Like, it completely gets absorbed into our body. There's no excrement, there's no waste. It's all completely absorbed by each of the Jewish people going through the desert. It was perfect food. And the Erev Rav, this mixed multitude, start to complain. They complain about the travel. They complain about the food. And they instigate complaints. And they become, and the word used in the Torah for them being complaining, that they are the misnonanim. It's a reflexive word, that they became complainers. Not just that they complained, which is, we can all complain and we have a right. We are maybe hardwired sometimes to complain, and that's okay to complain. But is it constructive complaining? Am I complaining because it's going to help me? Is it going to unload my chest, or it's going to lead me to a solution? Is it constructive? Is it destructive? Does it consume me? Do I become a complainer so that everything that happens to me is just I'm going to complain about that and complain about that and can become complainers. So the Erev Rav become misnonanim. They become complainers, and they are a bad influence. And the Jewish people, some of them, get mixed up with this desire for meat. So what's interesting about the juxtaposition between the manna, which is this white, holy, angelic food that descends from the heavens, and the meat that they ask for. I read somewhere that what they wanted was, they wanted to want. Like they had everything, like I just said, they had the clouds and the fire and the water and the manna, and they had everything. They didn't want for anything. And what they wanted was to want. They desired a desire. They wanted a desire. So they injected, and what's meat? Meat is red. There's something like earthy about it, something very physical and sort of like the antithesis of this spiritual white food was this sort of meat and red and they wanted to want, and they aroused complaints amongst the group. So what are we learning here? We're learning, careful who you hang out with. You don't want to hang out with people who complain all the time, who are like their nature is to complain. They're people who are going to take you away. It's okay to complain. It's not like they're saying you should never complain, but is it constructive? Is it going to help you? Is it going to lead you somewhere? Is it going to, maybe from a mental health standpoint, you need to complain sometimes, but can you find a solution? Are you looking for the good? Like these people had everything they wanted. And again, it's about pulling the Jewish people away, pulling us as a people away from connection to God. God's saying, I'm giving you everything. And they're saying, but I need meat, or I want something. And it was free in Egypt. They say this. They say it was free in Egypt. It was a crazy thing to say. The Jewish people were slaves in Egypt. They got food, but they were slaves in Egypt. And now they have the audacity to say that food that we had, the fish that we had, the melons, the garlic and the onions, whatever, was free. So many of the commentators say what was free was that there were that they're harping on the fact that now this Jewish people are learning Torah. They're learning how to connect to God. So yes, they're free from the slavery from Egypt, but now they're moving into a place where they're learning how to be in relationship to God. So the question is, what's freedom? We have many long conversations at our Seder table about what freedom is, and perhaps what resonates most with me is the sense that freedom doesn't mean you can do anything you want, right? And if you let a child do whatever they want, it would be havoc. So within a certain structure, there's freedom. But there is a structure, there are boundaries, there are rules, how you can live around other people, how you can live in the world, how, they can't just do whatever you want. That might be, anarchy. So what is freedom? So from the Jewish perspective, freedom is connecting to the source of freedom, like God, who is the source of spirituality, the source of everything, is the ultimate freedom, is being connected to the infinite, and being connected to the source of everything. If we can connect ourselves to that, to God, to divine, to the transcendent, then we're truly free. We're not tied down. Like how many of us actually are free? The point at which a person exits this world, when we die, our soul leaves the physical realm. It leaves our body and it goes up into the spiritual realm. It's free. That's the ultimate freedom, is when our soul, that is who we are, right? Our soul leaves our body and it's free to be in relationship to God without the constraints, without the body to like block the way. And so here on earth, in our domain, right? So part of becoming free is to connect ourselves to the divine while we're still alive. Like how to do that. Shabbos, they say the Sabbath is a little bit of the world to come, because it's a relationship to God. It's a day where we push the physical world aside and we sit in that time frame where there's a bubble of time where we have a relationship to each other, to our souls, to God, to prayer, to food, like everything. We bring the physical and we elevate it. Like in the beginning of the Torah portion, when Moses is Aaron is lighting the menorah. He's lighting it up, like making it all glow, making it all like not so bound to the physical, something that transcends and goes up and has something magical and beautiful and divine about it. Is a goal, like how to get there. So perhaps it's about like setting aside a day, Shabbos, as a day to get in touch with our souls and get in touch with God and fire ourselves up so we can take that into the week. And perhaps it's about maybe it's about gratitude when we talk about manna and all the things that God gave us, and yet we're complaining, we're taking ourselves away. The Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, is taking us away. Like, no, it's not enough. You have to have meat. You have to have something red. You have to have a desire. You have to go after your lusts. Do we? do we? Do we? I don't know. Do we? Can we be happy with what we have? I mean, again, I don't want it to be fickle, and I don't want, but on some level, you know, like enough. Like, what do we need? What do we lust after? And can we curtail those lusts? And can we be grateful and happy and feel fulfilled with what we have? Can we be fulfilled with the manna that's coming from heaven, or not? And so I think that, you know, this idea of the mixed multitudes coming in and creating a complaint. There's a complaint nature of this Eruv Rav, of this mixed multitudes, that infiltrates into our congregation. So do we have the same mission? Do we have the same goal? What are we trying to do? We're trying to learn Torah. We're trying to follow God wherever he goes. No, we're following. We're learning. We're following. We're like the sheep. We're still in the sheep, and then we become an ox, and then we become a twins by the time we get to the month of Sivan and we get the Torah. But this progression, like we have to learn to start walking on our own, but we also still have to recognize that God's with us every step of the way. So when these people start complaining, and the Jewish people start complaining, they want meat. They don't want the manna anymore. They want meat. They want something else. They want something different. And there's something about that lesson that we could bring with us today. And it also says that the Jewish people, when they left Sinai, were like, it says in the Medrash that they were like children running away on the last day of school. You know, when that, maybe it can't really relate to that today anymore, but when that final bell at the end of the semester rings and the children run outside because they're so happy to be done with school. Now maybe they want to run back to school, but you know, in the old days when the bell would ring and the children would leave school, I remember it myself. I was so happy to be free, so happy to go away from the rules of school and having to sit and learn, and you know, and I wanted to be free. I didn't want to be in school anymore. And now we recognize the importance of being in school. But the point is that it says, like, the Jewish people, when they left Sinai, they were like children running away from school. We were like, don't give me any more mitzvahs. I have enough. Don't give me any more. And it's so interesting because it's so in contrast to Aaron, who at the beginning of the Torah portion says, I want to bring the sacrifices like the rest of the tribes, and I don't have that to do. Or the people who are carrying the bones of Joseph, and they say, we didn't get to bring the Passover sacrifice. We want to do that too. And God's saying, okay, I'll give you the Pesach Sheni, I'll give you the second chance, I'll give you the menorah, and I'll give you the blessing of the people. And now we have you know, us walking through the desert and following God with the clouds and the fire, and we start to complain. We're complaining about the spiritual, earthy, the spiritual angelic food. We're complaining about the angelic food. We're complaining that to live on a high spiritual level is maybe too much for us. Maybe we can't live at that high level. We have to eat meat. We have to eat something that's red and in the physical world. Maybe that's too much. Maybe to live like Moses is too much for us. And as we keep going through the Torah portion, what happens next is we learn about Moses, and how Moses says, I can't carry these people. It's too much for me. Like I don't know how to keep this Jewish people on a high spiritual level, right? I don't know how, since I'm in my merit comes the manna. The manna comes out of the heavens because of Moses teaching Torah to the people, and the people are like running away. The people are running away, and Moses says, I can't do it. And he even asked to die. He says, kill me. I can't carry these people on my own. Like, I didn't give birth to them. I can't carry them. And what does God do? God says, okay, I'll give you 70 elders, and some of your light, some of your prophecy will go onto those people. And we have this concept of smicha. I don't know if you've heard of that term, but smicha is where somebody becomes a rabbi, and the school that is conferring, or rabbis that are conferring a rabbi title onto their student will place their hands on top of their student and give them smicha, like bestow upon them the title, the accolade, the level of being called rabbi. Right now, you have reached this level of knowledge and understanding and connection to God that you get to be called rabbi, and it's conferred with a procedure whereby they put your hands on top of the head and you confer smicha onto the student. So Moses is conferring smicha onto these 70 elders. Who are the 70 elders? It's crazy who these 70 elders are. These 70 elders were people in Egypt who were the overseers of the Jewish people. There were Jewish people who were given the task by the Egyptians of making sure that the rest of the Jewish people, the slaves, did their work. And if they didn't do their work or didn't make the right amount of bricks or quota or whatever they were supposed to do, then these overseers would have to beat and whip the people under their charge. And they refused to do that. They took the beating instead of giving beating. So the Egyptians would come along and say, where's all the bricks that we, and they say, well, we did the best they can. And the overseers would be beaten for not forcing or pushing or making their workers work harder. And they couldn't bring themselves to beat a fellow Jew. They would rather take the beating from the Egyptians than beat a fellow Jew. And it says in our Proverbs, where's the saying I wanted to read to you? It says in the Proverbs that something about sharing the burden, about the high level it is to share in others' burdens, to have empathy for another person, how high of a level that is to empathize with the other. And that's what these 70 elders, who are going to now become the helpers of Moses in the desert, these 70 leaders showed that they shared in the burdens of the Jewish people by taking beatings instead of giving beatings to the slaves in Egypt, that they would refuse to do that and they got beaten in their stead. So that level of empathy, that level of connection to the Jewish people was recognized as something so truly wonderful and magnificent that they became the 70 elders, and Moses transfers some of his prophecy, so to speak, onto them. And again, it's like lighting the candle. It's not like he diminished his prophecy by giving it over, but that it's lighting and raising up, like lifting up. And there's even an idea that every single person in the congregation, I'm going to use the word congregation instead of camp, because camp, again, according to Soloveitchik, is just a fear-based group, versus a congregation that has a common mission, a common value. We have a common purpose. And so this congregation, according to many commentators, every single person in that congregation had the capacity and the ability to be a leader, had capacity to be somebody who could connect to God on a very high level. And so too, again, bring it down to our day, every single one of us has that capacity to bring ourselves close, to bring ourselves up, to keep pushing ourselves along. I was talking to someone recently who was saying, I'm in lockdown and I don't see a lot of people. I don't do a lot of things. I don't go out there and do the things I used to be doing, and I'm feeling very badly about that. And one of the things that I learned that I shared with her was really helpful is that at the end of the day, and there's a lot of stories about this, but at the end of the day, who is it that we can affect, that we can change? And really, it's the job starts at home with us, with each one of us. Like, we get birthed into the world, and we sort of birth ourselves into the next world. And this bridge of life that we're on now, we don't know how long it's going to last for each one of us, but who are we going to be, each one of us individually, who are we going to be when we're done, when we birth ourselves into the next world? And so the work starts at home, right? We can try to change everybody else and try to inspire everybody else, but it starts at home. Light your own fire, learn your own Torah, like do whatever it is that you need to do to work on yourself, to be less angry, to be more giving, to be whatever it is, to be more loving of oneself, to more compassionate of oneself, and recognize that we are created in the image of God, and each one of us has a meaning and a need, even if we're not doing a lot out in the world, that God needs us and God loves us and God's with us. So that point is, I think, very, very powerful, because we might feel like, I'm not doing anything because I'm not out in the world doing stuff, but just being, and the fact that we are still here and God is still flooding ourselves, each one of us, with love and light, that's huge. Like, God loves us, God needs us, and that's where it starts. So Moses Again, it's amazing. It fits right in with this Torah portion. Moses says, I can't do this alone. Like, he feels so alone, and he prays out to God. He says, I can't carry this. People like complaining, and I don't know what to do. And he's like beyond. He's like bursting. Like, I can't do this. And God says, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. Like, can we really believe that? Can we really know that God's with us? You know, and another thing that I really want to mention is the idea that when people die of COVID, a lot of people say, I'm so sad that they died alone, that I wasn't with them, like children who couldn't be with their parents when they died, or siblings when they couldn't be with their siblings when they died. And yes, there is a concept of being with a person when they die, but there's also a concept that when a person's sick, the divine presence, the Shekhinah, the feminine presence rests with that person, is over the head of the person, which is actually why we pray when you go to visit a sick person, you should pray for the sick person in the presence of the sick person, because the Shekhinah is there. Just like there's there's a thing about praying at a chuppah, because the divine presence descends on a chuppah. Divine presence descends at a brit milah, when there's circumcision. There's a lot of people praying when the circumcision is happening, because the divine presence is there. So similarly, when we visit a sick person, divine presence is there. Pray for the sick person, pray for other sick people, pray for whatever. Pray, because the divine presence is there. Shekhinah, the divine feminine presence, is present there with that sick person. So even if you as a living person cannot be with a person who's dying, there is great comfort in knowing that the divine presence is there. And as the person's soul leaves, and it leaves in stages, but as that divine soul starts to leave the body, it starts to move up into the hell. It sees the souls of their predeceased relatives and loved ones coming to meet them, coming to greet them, coming to bring them into the world to come. So again, we could say, I feel so bereft of my loved one, which I am, but I wanted to be there when they died, and I feel like I abandoned them. And the Jewish tradition is teaching us that there is perhaps be comforted by the fact that divine presence is there, and the souls of the predeceased relatives and friends come to meet them and greet them and bring them into the world to come. So yes, they're leaving you behind, but they're moving into these higher realms, and that's the ultimate freedom, right? So we talked about freedom. That's the ultimate freedom, going in that direction. And actually, people who have near-death experience that get brought to life, they're actually reported many times that they didn't want to come back. That they were so attracted by what they were going towards, that when they were brought back, it was like, but they had a mission, they had something to do, and there are a lot of stories about that. So it's pretty inspiring, that stuff. Anyway, so I want to mention something else about when people die, because as I'm an active member of the Chevra Kadisha, I want to tell you that one of the things that we say when we finish, so the English word is a coffin, the Hebrew word is an aron, it's an ark. We put the body, which is the house, like the Torah scroll, we put the Torah scroll in our arks, in our synagogues, right? We put the body, which is like a image of, the image of God, we put that in an aron, we put it in an ark. And when we close the ark, this is what we say. We say what's exactly in this week's Torah portion. We say, when the ark would journey, Moses said, okay, and here it is, arise, Hashem, and let your foes be scattered. Let those who hate you flee from before you. And when it rested, he would say, reside tranquilly, O Hashem, among the myriad thousands of Israel. And that's what we say when we close the aron on a coffin. We say this exact saying that's in this week's Torah portion. And this week's Torah portion, those words, and perhaps they're ones you've heard of, V'hi v'nso Aaron v'yomer Moshe. We sing it in Shul. Kuma Hashem v'yafutzu v'yanecha. It's when we take the Torah scroll back to the ark, then we sing this thing, and it's bracketed. It's two sentences bracketed by upside down nuns. The letter nun inverted. So if you look in the Torah scroll, if you look in the Chumash, look in the Bible, you'll see that there's a nun that's turned upside down. Then we have these two sentences, and then there's another nun turned upside down at the other side, and it brackets these two verses. So these two verses are about God being with us. when you travel, when the ark travels, that God is with you, and he's going to scatter your foes, and he's going to reside with you, and you will reside tranquilly. And that's what we pray for when the body is being moved, when we take the aron and we put the lid on it, and we say, this is an aron that's going to move with God in attendance, and this is an aron that's going to be tranquilly moved and live tranquilly forever. Like, it's amazing. And we say that in synagogue when we put the Torah away, and we say it over a coffin, over an aron, when we put the lid on. We say the same thing, and it's here in this week's Torah portion, and it's bracketed by the N, by these nuns. So nun is a letter that is an interesting letter, but one of the words that this letter is the beginning of is the word for fallen. So, and it appears in this week's Torah portion between the three different complaints that the Jewish people had, or the Erev had. They had the complaints about the manna. They had the complaints about, let's get out of Mount Sinai, let's leave so we don't get more mitzvahs, more commandments. And it's also the complaints about traveling and having to pack up and travel for 3 days. It's such a hardship. That there were three complaints, and that these two sentences appear, they break up the three. They break it up so that it doesn't keep the potential to fall, doesn't continue to have the same energy. Break up the complaints with God's with you. Break it up, because the more you complain, the more you slide down that complaining slippery slope. So break it up, and God breaks it up with this sentence, and it's the same sentence that we say when we put the lid on a coffin. So I think it's just important to say that. So we're wandering in the desert. How are we doing on time? Right, 10 minutes. They wanted meat. They got that. So they're traveling, and God's with them. And Moses says, I can't do this alone. And God says, don't worry, I'm with you. Give you the 70 elders. They're people who shared the burdens in Egypt. They're people who have a high capacity to connect to and empathy for the Jewish people. Again, empathy, like such a high level to be at, to feel really empathetic. Again, a message for today, how to feel empathy for the other, how to know the other so we can feel empathy for the other. And then we have the episode where, because Moses is so elevated, because he's so spiritual, he went up into the heavens, he spoke to God face to face. He did not get his prophecies through a dream or through a vision. It was face to face, so to speak, whatever that means. That he was a different level of prophet than anybody ever. And so Miriam and his sister and Aaron have a conversation about the fact that Moses is separating sexually from his wife, Zipporah. That in order to be ready to be in contact with God every single moment of any single day, he couldn't have sexual relationships with his wife. And so he separates from his wife. And somehow Miriam heard about it, and she says something to Aaron about it. And here is where we learn again about the ills of speaking about other people, of lashon hara, of speaking ill of another person. And even Miriam, who is so loving of Moses, like she saved him from the bulrushes, and she, brought her mother as the wet nurse when Moses gets pulled out of the bulrushes by Batia, the daughter of Pharaoh, and goes into the palace and comes back. And Miriam's always there watching over her little brother Moses, and like such a loving presence. Even Miriam, who had a good heart and was not trying to bring Moses down, even when she spoke this to Aaron, she gets afflicted with this physical ailment called psoriasis that we learned about before. And she has to be quarantined. She has to leave the camp and go through a process of remorse and regret and teshuvah, return. And she has to leave the camp for a week. And the people wait for her. Moses waits for her, and the people wait for her, because she is such. She did the wrong thing, and she got afflicted, and she had to stand outside the camp, but people are waiting for her. What a concept of waiting. Like a Jewish people, where Jewish people wait. We're waiting for COVID to be over. Everybody's waiting for COVID to be over. We're waiting for the Messiah to come. We're waiting for, the world to come. We have a concept of waiting. As much as we're doing and going, and again, it's about the journey. Is it the journey? Is it the destination? In the journey, there's aspects of waiting. We're waiting. And these Jewish people waited for Miriam. And Moses, about whom she spoke, is also waiting. Just like she waited on the banks for him, he's going to wait for her. And that relationships get re-cemented. Interesting, like when we wait for other people, when we have patience with other people, and maybe sometimes in this day and age, now it's a little hard to be patient. It's hard to wait, but we're learning, right? We're learning to wait. We don't know what will be. We're waiting. We have faith. Hopefully, we can wait this out, or we can do what we need to do. But this idea of them waiting. And then what does Moses do? He prays for her. And this is the first prayer for healing. And his prayer is very, very, very short. It says, Moses cried out to God, saying, please Hashem, heal her now. That's his prayer. It's like this. It's little. It's not a whole big embellishment. It's just heal her. Enough. It's a relationship. It's a prayer. The need to pray, the need to connect, the need to say, like we need to, help my sister, pray, right? Even though she brought it on herself, pray. I'm thinking a little bit about some of the Jewish people in New York, mostly I think that we've read about, where they were defying the laws of being in quarantine, and they were still having weddings, and they were still whatever they were doing, and they would get sick, and then people will say, like they deserved it, or it's their fault or something. So maybe here there's a benefit of the doubt to be had, where Miriam, she did say the wrong thing about Moses. She didn't mean to. She didn't know what she was saying was maybe so bad. Maybe she had a purpose for it. Maybe she had again, make up a scenario where there's a benefit of the doubt analysis, where she gets on the side of righteousness, and that's where she was coming from. However, it was the wrong thing to do, and she ended up sick. And people wait and they pray, and so therefore, shouldn't we be praying for each other? We for sure should be praying for each other, as much as we might bring upon ourselves. Sickness or whatever. Like, we should still pray for people. We should wish them well, want them to be better, want them to be elevated, want them to get out of their dire situations. That for sure. Go back to the idea of these elders who had this amount of empathy, and how inspiring that is, to be a person with empathy, and a person like Moses who prays, or like the whole Jewish people waiting for Miriam. There's amazing lessons. Pray and wait, benefit of doubt. So I think that what I'll do now is I'll bring it all back together. So I think that when I think about all these different episodes, and I didn't mention them all, there are some other things that happen in this week's Torah portion, but basically we have the idea of menorah, of the lamp, of the light, of the fire, of rising up, of being elevated, of like being passionate, Aaron being humble, and also being able to spread light, and being able to do it with passion and fervor, and with the same amount of excitement and uniqueness every single day. Like, make your day unique, make your day passionate, make your day in your mind meaningful. And that he had an envy for other people, which was a good envy. I want to be more whatever. I want to be like that. I want to be able to bring that sacrifice. I want to be able to bring that Passover sacrifice, as the people who carried the bones of Joseph out of Egypt. Like, they wanted to do it too, and they complained. They asked God, and God said, okay, here's what you do. Here, you get the second chance. You get a second chance to do over the sacrifice, the Passover sacrifice. But Aaron, you get menorah. You get that forever. Like, it's going to go through the generations. We're still got Hanukkah. We're still lighting the menorah. We're still bringing that light every year. The Chashmonayim were descendants of Aaron. He continues to be the source of lighting the menorah, bringing that light, spreading it, learning that lesson, elevating ourselves, going into a transcendent place. And then we have this following God in the desert with the clouds and the fire, and recognizing that God's with us, that God's leading us. And even though it might be uncomfortable, and even if we might not want to, there's a higher purpose to be served. This juxtaposition of the congregation with a camp, that the congregation has a shared mission, a shared purpose, and that we want to be part of that, because it's not about me, it's about us, it's about the whole group. And yes, it's about me also, and who I'm going to be as I journey through life. What are the campments in my life, and how do I learn from that, and where am I going, and what am I learning as I go along? And the desire for freedom, is it true freedom? Is it freedom from enslavement? Is it freedom to be in relationship to God, who is the source of ultimate freedom? That kind of concept of going towards God as a way to be free ultimately. And then the idea of the complainers, and what we complain about, and whether we become complainers, break it up. Like one complaint leads to another. God in the Torah breaks it up with this that God's along with us, that God's coming along, that he's with us, that he's imminent as much as we recognize that he's with us, that and to know that, and to pray to him, and to complain to him, and to, or maybe not even use the word him, because that's the masculine aspect of God, to play to the Shekhinah, pray for healing, pray for the healing of the world. At this point it's so pervasive everywhere. To not become a complainer, and yet recognize what needs to be fixed, and to pray for those things, or work for those things, work for justice, work for equality, work for recognizing the image of God in all people, and not pursuing the lustful desires of meat, like they want meat. Like maybe not do that. Like we don't need to follow all of our desires, and not to speak lashon hara. To be careful. Like, what are we listening to? Like, can we blot it all out? Can we listen to the trumpets that declared that it was time to move on? Right, time to move on. Can we hear the trumpets? What's the noise that's coming in through our ears? What are we listening to? What are we hearing? So at the end of the day, I think it's about yearning for something. What is it that we're yearning for? What do we have a passion for? Do we have a trust in God? Are we able to be empathetic to each other? Are we able to put Shabbos, Torah, Jewish people in the center of our world, or people who are downtrodden? Like, what's at the center of how we think and what we do? Not to gossip, to pray, and to know that God's with us. And I think that's a lot for this week's Torah portion. Next week, I think I'm going to teach on Monday. I have something else on Tuesday, and I hope that was an interesting share.